With the dawning of a new era of Grace bringing out their first domestic sewing machine, today I am pushing myself out of my comfort zone and doing something which I don't often do, which is I'm gonna sew clothes. The pattern I've chosen is the Elodie Wrap Dress. It's by Closet Core, and the reason why I chose this pattern is because not only have I seen it on social media and I think it's a really flattering dress, but also there are no zippers, there are no buttonholes, so it makes it quite simple. So let's get going. I know this part looks terrifying and horrific, but actually when you buy the pattern, it comes with an option that you can print it out onto regular printer paper and then gives you the exact lines you need to tape in order to have the full size pattern without having to pay out and go to the print shop. So that's exactly what I've done. So from here, we're going to go ahead and start cutting. I will say a little tip about this pattern is go ahead and get your measurements and base the pattern size you choose on your measurements and not your traditional dress size that you would go by in the store. Once your pieces are all cut out, you're going to go ahead and follow the directions and stay stitch the areas that they tell you to. Once you've stay stitched your heart out, then put those pieces aside right now and you are going to be assembling the back. And the back starts with marking your notches. The patterns are really great because they're really clear. So you just make a couple of marks and then you are going to put a pin in to hold it while you stay stitch them again. I'm not gonna lie, things like this, like pleats, usually really freak me out, but this pattern is so nice and simple that it kind of breaks it down and makes it easy. Now you have your pleats in place, the pattern says to go ahead and sew down the back seam of the top. They also give you the instructions that you need to sew 5/8 of an inch. Now, because I'm a quilter and not a garment sewer, I've actually gone ahead and marked where that is so that I don't go too far wrong. So you now have your back sewn. You can pattern match if you want. and you're going to concentrate on the front now, and you're going to do the notches on the front. The notches will mark the pleats. So you mark out the areas on the pattern, and then you are going to sew 3 more pleats. And we're just going to press these new pleats to the center and baste them in place. Pleats seem like difficult, and it would have definitely put me off a pattern in the past, but it's explained so well in this pattern, so give it a try. There you go. That's the back, and there's the front with the pleats. Now for the exciting part where we actually start putting it together. So with your back bodice that you've sewn up the back, you're going to go ahead and pin the front bodice at the shoulders, and you are going to sew that with a 5/8 seam allowance. I will just check that 5/8 again. It's quite big. Okay, once the shoulder seams are done, you can go ahead and match up the side and underarm, and you're going to sew that with a 5/8 seam allowance. Those noises are actually pugs. One is snoring and one is just snuffling. Look, it's coming together. Slowly and surely, it has pleats and everything. Okay, these are the facings for the neck and the collar. They have got interfacing ironed onto them, and I'm going to sew these with a 5/8 seam allowance at the neckline now. And then what it wants you to do is either zigzag the whole length all the way around the outside. It says zigzag or serge, and I actually have a serger because I did used to make little clothes for my kids, so I'm gonna do that. These are my buddies. Swinky under the sewing table. Oh, you wagging your tail? You saying hello? And then over here we have Miss Bella. Hi. Hi. So here's my very old but still wonderful serger, or overlocker as we call it in England. Then in the area you have just serged, it asks you to fold that over by 3/8 of an inch and go ahead and iron that down. And then you are going to top stitch that in place. I guess the only tricky bit here is the corners, but it's completely doable. Just take your time. Then with that edge all pressed under, we are going to go ahead and top stitch all around the outside. Look how lovely that looks, all finished. I need a coffee break. So while I'm drinking my coffee, I was gonna go ahead and show you the system that I use from Grace for cutting usually my pixel quilts. That's kind of what I usually do. And the reason I love this system so much, not only is it ergonomic, so it really puts less stress on my hand, which when I'm cutting for kind of 4 or 5 hours for a pixel quilt is really important. But it also has this amazing system where you have a lip here and a little lip here, and it means that you are never going to suffer an injury. If you are careful, you should never ever have an injury. And after you've been cutting for a while, that was important to me. So definitely check out the Grace cutting system. Okay, this is where it starts getting exciting, because this is where we're going to apply the facing to the bodice. So along that neckline, you are going to apply the raw edge of your facing, pin it well, and then you are going to go ahead and sew that with a 5/8 seam allowance. This is where the stay stitching along the neckline really helps, because obviously you've got one fabric that's quite light and flimsy, and now you've got a more sturdy fabric with interfacing that you're sewing onto it. So this is where it's kind of important to do the stay stitching. Okay, now I'm sewing the facings with the interfacing in to the neckline. It needs you to do it at 5/8. So again, I've measured and marked, because it just seems such a big area when you're used to a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now that it's all sewn on, you're going to want to put it inside, and then you are going to want to give that a nice press. Okay, with your facings on, it's looking very beautiful. Now I want you to do 2 things. One is where that facing sits at the shoulder seam, it wants you to just kind of stitch in the ditch there a little bit, like 1/2 inch. And that just means that it will sit there nicely. And then the other thing it says to do, which I'm not going to do right now, is it wants you to understitch the seam allowance to the facing. So, but the bit I will do, which is next, is we are gonna sew both the sleeve hems and finish those off. Okay, so I must admit, in my younger days, there would have been steps that I've done that I probably would have skipped, and one of them that I most definitely would have skipped would have been hemming. You can do it fine without pressing, but I just find if you press before you sew, the finish is better. So here goes. Okay, this is where it starts to get really exciting. We're going to do the skirt. So you have to get the two skirt backs. You're going to sew those together down the seam, and then you're going to sew both of those onto the skirt fronts. It's a lot of sewing. Skirt's done. It's a lot of seams. And now move on to the belts. There's two of them because they don't go the entire way around. They go either side. And what you're going to do is put them right sides together, and then you are going to sew the entire length. And then you will have the wonderful job of pulling them through. Let's do it. Once you've sewn your belts, I know there's like lots of specialist tools you can get to do this, but actually pushing something like this back through, I just have a chopstick and it works perfectly. So now we're going to iron this. Okay, the belts are nicely pressed, makes a real difference, so don't skip out on that part. And now we're going to assemble the waistband. So what you need to do is get the parts of the waistband, so you have the back and the two sides. One is interfaced and then one isn't interfaced, and we are going to go ahead and sew one right hand side to the waistband. Now one of them, the one that's interfaced, we're going to go ahead and sew that just with a basting stitch down the right hand side. And the reason it's only a basting stitch is that it will be removed at a later date, because that's where you will put your belt into. And then the other one is also going to need to just be basted as well. So we'll go ahead and do one side and then we'll come back and do the other. And put the other side on. Remember, you want the interfaced part to go with the other interface section, and then the non-interface section to go with the non-interface section. sewn your waistband, you need to go ahead on both of them and sew and iron the seams open. And then after you've done that, leave the interfaced one, grab the other one, and what you're going to do is press one long end of it under 5/8 of an inch and just press it. Putting that aside, we are now going to attach the interfaced part of the waistband to the bodice. Okay, waistband, that's where it's getting real. You're going to need to pin the waistband to right sides together to the front of your bodice. This is the interface waistband. This is the one you're going to want to pin, and it will overlap by about 5/8 of an inch. You're going to need to get the side seams lined up, and if it doesn't fit and you know you've cut it out right, chances are your pleats aren't deep enough. So just FYI. When it's all pinned, you're actually going to baste this in place within the seam allowance. So this is the first stage of the waistband. You have got that basted on, we are going to turn the bodice to the wrong side. So the inside now of the bodice, we're going to go ahead and line up the waistband without the interfacing on and stitch that in place. So now you're going to sew through all 3 layers. You've got the interfaced waistband, the bodice, and the non-interfaced waistband. And you are going to sew with a bigger seam allowance, a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, so it will catch that smaller seam allowance and you won't see it for the interfaced waistband. So you just sew the entire length of the bodice now. This is the bit where it gets really exciting. Now we're going to grab the skirt and we're going to attach it right sides together to the waistband with the interfacing. So you are just going to pin this like your life depends on it, and then we are going to go ahead and sew. For this one you need to use a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and just to make sure that your waistband extends past the skirt 5/8 of an inch. Okay, now that's done, you're going to get the right side of your dress and you're going to pin the unfinished end of the belt to either side of the outer waistband. Just align the raw edges, but when you sew it, you baste it in place, you need to do it within the seam allowance and you just need to stitch through the outer belt. So you can see how it's lined up here. in the waistband. The belt, the raw edges are the same, and now we're just going to baste it in place. And now that is basted in there, we're going to go ahead and close this. So now the belt is basted into place, we're going to go ahead and close this, and we're going to do a 5/8 of an inch stitch along there. And then you can see when it's turned right sides out, the belt will sit nicely in the waistband. So you just need to go back and clip these so it sits nice. You can see how nicely that finishes it off, and eventually you will press and then just hand baste this. But before you do that, you've got to get these basting stitches out of the right side seam. So you're going to open up this area in the right seam so that you can pass the belt through. To do that, you just need to get a seam ripper and take out just a few of the stitches in between that area on both seams. They will be sewn back together by hand after this has been sewn into place. And here is the inside of the dress, all ready to just be hand stitched. The last two little bits of sewing to finish it off is to hem the whole of the skirt and then just close the hole in the side where the belt comes through. Just neatly close that up a little bit. This is it. This is the Elodie Wrap dress. The skirt is really full, which is what I love about it. So go check out their pattern, and it truly is a dress you can make in a day, even when you're a quilter and you don't really sew garments. So go check them out.